If you want to get the most out of your powerlifting program, then you've probably heard that high amounts of volume will yield high results. Or at least that's what many powerlifters and bodybuilders thought for the majority of their training career up until the last few years. In fact, Brad Schoenfeld had a few studies about the dose relationship of volume to muscle mass. However, for powerlifters, that information is only helpful if that training style allows for better strength or better training outcomes. In today's video, I want to talk about the utility of volume and how we can take advantage of it for powerlifters to get stronger and add weight to the bar in your squat, bench, and deadlift, or any other movements that you care about, as well as talk about some practical takeaways and how to build a more effective training program using the information in this video. First, let's talk about what volume actually is. First of all, volume on its own doesn't mean a whole lot because volume is simply a measurement of a quantity. For example, if you're drinking orange juice, the volume of the glass can help you to guide how much orange juice to pour in that glass and how much you might be drinking from that glass. However, with training, set count could be one way to measure volume. How many sets are you doing? How many total reps are you doing? How much tonnage are you performing? What's the volume of tonnage, the volume of sets, the volume of repetitions? If you think about that deeper, you might realize that the way that you experience any given set can differ from one day to another. So when we think about volume, we have to think about the volume of what? And I think for powerlifters, the most effective way to think about volume is in context to the specific goal. For example, if you think that the best way to build your squat is to build a crap load of muscle on top of your quads and get them as big as possible, then you would want to know the volume of mechanical tension and the impact in which that volume of mechanical tension has on the outcome of your goal, which is to build mass in your quadriceps. Right? If your goal is to improve technique because you think your technique is preventing you from getting stronger, then we want to think about volume in terms of sets or repetitions because we want to think about how much practice we're getting. How many repetitions are we providing for us to practice a new or challenging technique? If we're trying to maximize strength, then the question becomes, what is the metric that would allow us to build the most amount of strength? Some coaches believe that more volume will lead to more strength. Some coaches believe that higher quality of sets with a specific focus or cues will allow for more strength expression. But before we dig into the volume-dose relationship equation further, I want to highlight that strength is a byproduct of the psychological, sociological, and biological conditions in any moment in time. For example, I'm sure you are aware that your ability to express strength at a commercial gym with mediocre equipment where you don't feel as safe or as comfortable is much more challenging than squatting with your best friends and comrades who support you and can literally protect you from hurting yourself if you were to test your limits on the day. We have this ability to self-limit for protection. We will limit our ability to express our strength to prevent ourselves from getting hurt. If you have higher levels of anxiety about injury, then it might be more challenging for you to take advantage of all of the benefits that you have, all of the tools that you have to express strength. So I want to highlight that first. The next thing is that volume is a tool that we can use to manipulate the biological adaptations that we make that will then otherwise contribute to strength expression, but it's not the only tool that allows us to express more strength. So I really want you to think about that when it comes to how much volume do I need? How much volume of blank do I need to elicit the specific adaptations that I'm after? Most athletes like to think about the optimal amount of volume that would get them the most gains, the most growth, the most strength, which makes sense. However, it's incredibly difficult to find the optimal amount for you in any moment in time to elicit the best adaptation for tomorrow's session. But we may be able to answer the question of what's the minimum effective dose to elicit a positive adaptation for our goal. And in this case, let's just say it's strength expression in the squat, bench, and or deadlift. Another way to think about it is, have you ever seen a study where doing at least one hard set resulted in no muscle growth or no strength gain for the participants in the study? Typically, the answer is that at least one hard set will elicit a positive adaptation. When I say one hard set, Most of the current evidence that we can look into suggests that any set with at least 4 or 5 reps in reserve will elicit enough mechanical tension to induce hypertrophy. And I think that's a good proxy for an effective set, i.e. an effective set for strength, because when we're training to get stronger, one of the most effective biological adaptations that we can create as powerlifters is hypertrophy within muscles that we're using for the movements that we care about. So if one hard set of squats elicits half of a gram of extra muscle mass, at some point in time we can take advantage of that extra muscle mass or muscle fiber development for more force production and therefore more strength expressed on the day. So why do we care about the minimum effective dose? The reason that the minimum effective dose is so useful is that one hard set of training typically results in very low levels of fatigue, especially for movements that we're quite familiar with. So if you assume that you're training more than once per week, or your training frequency is higher than once a week, then momentum in a positive direction is the first objective. And this is an objective that a lot of athletes forget about. Like, we just want to get stronger. So let's start with the least amount to make sure that we're somewhere close to the ballpark of what's actually necessary, what we can recover from, and what we can adapt to allow for us to get closer to our overall goal. Additionally, a lot of athletes, they do too much work and they keep pushing and they keep grinding and they have 5 to 10 sets of back off work at RPE 8, and then they wonder why they're not getting stronger. You're not getting stronger because you're not recovering. Your body is physically preventing you from expressing your maximum strength because you're doing too much work, your body is beat up, and you don't even want to be in the gym anymore. Not exactly ideal conditions for strength. So by prioritizing the minimum effective dose, we can add 1, 2, 3, 4 sets on top of that on days where we're feeling capable, and when those extra sets feel nourishing, instead of feeling bad about doing less than we otherwise planned because we're adapting our training volume to what we actually need instead of what we saw our favorite powerlifter do. Remember, training is an individual experience, and your training stimuli should be based off of your individual experiences and all of the accumulative stressors that you might be experiencing on any given day and how that impacts your ability to perform, recover, and adapt. I encourage you to start with a minimum effective dose. I hypothesize that one hard set, at least for the movements that you care about, is enough to elicit some positive adaptation. Will it be noticeable when it comes to strength expression on 1 week? No. Do you need to stick to one hard set forever? No, you don't. But start with one hard set around RPE 6 to 9 and see how that feels. See what happens when you do a little bit less than you may have expected. You might find you have more energy for some of the other movements in your program that you otherwise just did because they were there, but you put no energy into them. The reason why I'm not specifically talking about any particular study is because if you look at all of the studies that have ever been conducted on powerlifting, most of them don't last long enough for practical applications for your training. Instead, we have to think about the implication of a 4-week study with individuals that have time to volunteer themselves to strength training research. You're probably not that person, but that doesn't mean those studies are useless. It just means that we can take from them what is valuable and then build our own training ideology around what we're actually experiencing in the moment. What's the takeaway here? Well, we'll talk more about this in a video I'll make about training frequency, but when it comes to the volume of work, I think the idea is that you can make incredible progress with just one hard set a week for a muscle group. You might be surprised. It's not optimal, but you will make progress, especially considering that other movement patterns that you do that aren't directly targeting, like the quads, for example, can still elicit hypertrophy in the quads. If you do an overhead press, for example, and not a bench press, your triceps are still stimulated. So you can count that as 2 hard sets for your triceps. Or if you did a bench press, 1 hard set of bench press and 3 hard sets of chest press, then that's 4 hard sets for your triceps and chest that you may gain benefit from later. So experiment, try new exercises, try lower amounts of volume, try a little bit more volume, but take everything slow. Don't just guzzle down a bunch of volume at high RPEs and expect to progress if you've never experienced that before and you have no idea what your training response will be. I do have a free program available which you can download at the link below that will give you a good head start to make sure you can train effectively without burning yourself out right away. So if that sounds interesting, take a look at the video below and I'll talk to you in the next one.